Hello, and welcome to a podcast that will go into detail on what I learned in my Psychology 1101 class and how I plan to apply what I learned in the future. From learning to memory to sleeping to artificial intelligence, we will be taking you through the highlights of my experience so far in psychology. First off, I'd like to talk about something I thought I understood about psychology coming into this course that I've discovered is really quite incomplete. Before taking psychology, I thought learning was just the process of taking in new information and storing it in memory, usually intentionally and consciously, like with observational learning. In other words, I used to think of learning happening in a classroom-like environment where a student would sit to a lecture or read from a textbook to learn new information. While taking this course, I found that my idea about what constituted learning was very incomplete. In classical conditioning, for instance, an individual can learn to produce a response to a stimulus differently than he would have before being conditioned. An example of this could be feeling nauseated when smelling a certain food that you ate shortly prior to getting sick. Even though it may not have been the food that got you sick, you were conditioned to associate it with the sickness. While this learning happens unconsciously, it is still learning. Similarly, in operant conditioning, individuals learn to continue or stop performing an action based on a response stimulus added or taken away. An example of operant conditioning is in gambling, where gamblers are rewarded for gambling on a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement. These types of conditioning, which I did not know about before taking this course, are, like observational learning, powerful methods in which humans learn. Now we're going to talk about what has been the most surprising thing I learned this semester. The most surprising thing I learned this semester was the 7 sins of memory. I had no idea there were so many ways in which our memory can fail us and the serious consequences of those failures. Before taking psychology, I knew our memories were not perfect in terms of encoding information and recalling it, but nevertheless I was unaware of the extent to which our memory can fail us. For example, I never knew that memory misattribution existed and that it could occur when we would appear to be most observant, such as in the Oklahoma City bombing, where bystanders reported seeing another bomber that never existed. The suggestibility failure of memory, where people incorporate misleading information from external sources in their own personal memories, did not itself surprise me, but I was surprised by the extent to which people can create entire new narratives based on suggestions from others, like in the Lost in the Mall experiment. To improve my memory in the future, I am hoping to apply more often some of the advice in the lectures that I currently don't use as much as I should. This includes distributing practice over time so that my brain has more time to consolidate memories, taking practice tests, exercising, and improving my sleep routine. While I'm certain that I will still be affected by the 7 sins of memory, I think that applying these recommendations will help me especially in my academic life. Having been introduced to many concepts in psychology over the course of the semester, I was able to find many examples of psychological theories, principles, and research findings being applied in my life. One example of a psychological theory applied in my life is the dual process theory. This theory states that we have 2 systems for processing information: an unconscious and automatic system that enables us to process information quickly based on prior experience or patterns, and a conscious and effortful system that carefully analyzes new situations. When in high school, during the first days when I was finding my classes, I was using my conscious, effortful information processing system as I learned what routes I needed to take. I had to learn how far my classes were from each other, which friends I could talk to on the way from class to class, and where the restrooms were on the way from classes. After that period, though, I rarely thought consciously about how to get to my next class, as my other information processing system used the prior experience of me getting to class. Another example of a topic we study in psychology applied in my life is the interaction between short-term and long-term memory. Earlier in the summer, when I was creating a new Stripe account, I did not have something to write my password down on, so I created one and tried using rehearsal to keep the new password in my short-term memory. However, my mind drifted somewhere else after creating the account, and when I wanted to record the password, I had forgotten it because it was not encoded into my long-term memory. Had I continued to need to use this password, it is less likely that it would have left my short-term memory and eventually could have been encoded into my long-term memory. On the other hand, because I use my Google password to access things like Gmail or for authentication on other websites, I have it encoded in my long-term memory and do not need to continue rehearsing it to remember it. Based on what I've learned in psychology this semester, there are ways that I can apply what I learned in my daily, non-academic life. Moving forward, I hope to apply many of the recommendations on sleep hygiene from class in my daily life to improve the quality of my sleep each night. Specific activities I want to start applying include not eating a heavy meal less than 3 hours before bed, not using electronics before bed, and not using my bed for something other than sleep. This will help improve my daily life because with better quality sleep, I will be more capable of working on my hobbies or daily activities. One of the hobbies I specifically have is coding, where I do web development. Well, when working on a project, it is normal to have to implement third-party libraries and APIs, which, if I haven't used the resource before, entails often reading lots of documentation. Getting a full night of sleep aids in memory consolidation, which can make writing code to implement these resources much easier a day after being first introduced to the new library. In addition to applying what I learned in psychology to my daily life, there are also great applications in my major. I can apply what I learned about consciousness in this class to artificial intelligence, which is a component of my major in computer science. In class, we studied the key elements of consciousness, which involve having variations in alertness, awareness of ongoing sensations, and self-awareness. AI that can replicate a human consciousness we learned is called strong AI, while AI that can replicate intelligent behavior without replicating consciousness is weak AI. Learning how to replicate to some degree these characteristics which define consciousness is critical to developing more powerful artificial intelligence. As I learn about artificial intelligence in classes later on in college, I will be able to have a stronger understanding of the problems faced in creating AI, and I will be in a better position to improve on the AI we have in the future. Thank you for listening to my short podcast, and I hope you enjoyed it.